What's going on, Team Misfit? Before we dive into the Phase 3 podcast, you guys need to know where you can find us. You can head to teammisfit.com to just kind of explore, see all the blog, all the blog posts, the content that we have. And for the purpose of this podcast, of course, download Test Week for Phase 3 for free. We're about to get into the nuts and bolts of what that consists of and what you can expect over the next 7 weeks. But if you're just like, I'm on the fence, you want to see that Test Week for free, you can head to teammisfit.com now to download that. You can also find us on the SugarWOD Marketplace, where you can get a 2-week trial of the program for free, so that, again, you can kind of get your gym, get a feel for what the program's like. The beginning of the phase is always a good time to do that. And then when you kind of listen to the podcast that we're about to talk about and what you can expect over these next 7 weeks, you can kind of put all those things together to make sure your athletes are set up for success over the next 7 weeks. All right, let's get into it. What is going on, Team Misfit coaches? Hunter and Sher back for another Phase podcast.
Yo.
What is up? So we're just wrapping up. We're currently wrapping up Phase 2. By the time a lot of you listen to this, it will be Phase 3 test week. And we've seen some pretty fucking good PRs over the course of this test week, which is for Phase 2.
You know what's really cool about that too, as opposed to some of the other lifts, is like the deadlift, there's a little bit of skill there, and I don't want to gloss over and say you can just do whatever you want and you can pick a heavyweight up off the floor.
Yeah.
There is some skill there, but when it comes back to the traditional power lifts, the back squats,
Either got it or you don't.
Yeah, you don't see a lot of people PR. It's one of those things where like the brand new PR, the person that has a good day PRs, and then you have like a good staple of athletes that have been going to your gym for years who are like, cool, another phase, or it just feels like I pulled a bunch of deadlifts off the ground and I earned 5 pounds.
Yeah.
Boo.
This past phase has been the deadlift kind of peaking phase, trying to get everybody's 1 rep maxes up, along with our kind of traditional conditioning tests. But everybody always gets amped up for the 1 rep maxes. The deadlift I've seen, I don't want to say a ton because it's not, but we've seen a lot of 500-pound deadlifts from the men, a lot of 300 to 350 pound deadlifts from some of the women, and like over the course, for that to happen over the course of 5 weeks is pretty impressive. And it just goes to show kind of what your athletes are capable of, given, the opportunity to improve things like on a consistent basis, but do so in a way that's varied. It's not extremely rigidly structured to the point where people are just like,
skipping that day
this
completely.
is so fucking boring. Yeah. Like, I'd always do the same thing on Monday, always the same thing on Tuesday. And I think that's just kind of a great segue into talking about Phase 3. But again, one thing that's kind of cool about Phase 3 is we're now kind of back in line with the Misfit Athletic stuff, understanding that a lot of you coaches and owners out there, may have gotten on board as a result of following Misfit Athletics for yourself, or maybe taking what we write for our competitors and trying to make it work for your affiliates, which, kudos to you for trying to do it. I wouldn't want to, but it can be pretty tricky. But the point here is that, hey, give 7 weeks, a 7-week training cycle, give your athletes the opportunity to get through that test week, see where they're at, then actually focus on those little things, and then 6 weeks later they can retest and see their results and see their. And
the one thing I was just going to add to what you were saying about the PRs and whatnot. One thing that we like to do at Misfit Gym Portland, which is our Team Misfit Gym HQ, is that when we have a high CNS lift like the deadlift this past phase, or we have Buzz Smite year, or Captain Thunderpants for the test there, we actively collect that data and compare them to the previous phase, and we clearly underline and take a percentage and be like, all right, like for example, at Misfit Gym Portland, 60% of the athletes who attended on Monday our retest day PR'd their deadlift, which is quantifiable. It is proof in the pudding that things are working. We strongly suggest that you do that. And if you do have information like that, share it with us, because it's going to help us make the program better. So if you take that data in your gym, and if you're someone that really likes, taking down numbers and seeing progressions and having concrete evidence that your program is working, please share that with us, because we would love to not only repost you on social media and be like, look at this gym clearly doing the right things, because it's one thing to have a good program. It's another thing to execute that program the way it was intended to get the intended benefit. And clearly you're doing a good job of that. So, that type of stuff, I know you like to nerd out on numbers. Yeah. I really like to just see people having a good time and having some, some serious progress. But like, that is super important. And you should definitely hold on to that information, because that becomes ammunition for those times when you're in a class and someone's pushing back and be like, why are we doing this program, not somebody else's? And you'd be like, because last phase we saw 2/3 of the gym PR on this. But we clearly believe in the programming, and if you could show up consistently, you'll see similar results. So again, it just gives you coaches a little bit more ammunition to be like, not only do I know why we're doing it, but now I have evidence that shows that not only do I have my why, but it's leading to what we're going after, which is making all of you healthier and fitter.
Yeah, and to take that a step further, it's like, hey, why do you get your athletes? How do you get your athletes to keep coming into the gym? Well, if you can repeatedly over, every 7-week period show an athlete like, hey, look at that number, look at how much better that number is now. Like, proof. What more do you want as an owner or a coach to be able to show an athlete like, hey, you are getting fitter? And that's one of the things that I've always loved about CrossFit is the observable, measurable, repeatable things. I'm as a more analytic person, having those numbers to say like, you objectively, there's no opinion, there's no feeling in it, which might come as a surprise to some of you. It's just, I did better. The numbers don't lie. Numbers don't lie. So, to get into phase 3, we're going to be snatching everybody's favorite lift, but we need to just like
PSA real quick.
PSA, good Lord, please, for the love of God. We spent the last 2 actually phases, just because of kind of how the year-long structure played out. We spent the last 2 phases working on skill-based snatching, which means that for me, like the last phase when we did the tempo pull squat snatches, as somebody with a 235 snatch, I did not snatch heavier than 135, and most of the time it was like in the 95 to 115 pound range, working on those tempo snatches. When we go to our 1 rep max day, or which might have happened by the time you're listening to this, but when we go through the percentage work that you're going to see over the course of the next 6 weeks in the squat snatch, where it's just, more traditional triples, doubles, singles, or actually 5s, 4s, and 3s, so slightly less traditional, but kind of those, it's just lifting. Please, please, please encourage your athletes to take the things that they learned over the last 7 weeks and apply them with a little bit more weight on the bar.
And it's a little bit reinforced too. So like looking at just the program in general, one of the things that you and I talked about being like a salient point in the phase is that as athletes warm themselves up, they should go through some of the drills they've already previously experienced and gotten familiar with, as a means of not only reminding ourselves what positions we should be in, but also how things should go and how things should feel before we're worrying about putting, 55, 65, 70% and the 5% in the barbell. Because if you aren't taking the time to make sure that your positions are correct, the percentage work may work for you, but it's highly likely it's less effective than it would have been had you taken the time to make sure those positions are checked in with. And again, if you are brand new to our programming and you haven't done the last 2 phases of snatch work, you have an opportunity to kind of see how we think about lifting and how we get athletes prepared to do something when it becomes the sole lifting focus for the phase. You'll notice that the entire day is centered around this 30 to 40 minute session of just lifting, which in a lot of gyms is counterculture. It's like, we need to lift the Metcon every single day. And in Team Misfit gyms, we're going to have days where you have the option between some accessory work and a little bit of like, high intensity, like maybe short interval type of thing. But we want you to take that day and really try to hammer the basics of the snatch and then get your athletes to kind of buy into getting better at the basics. Because if you can convince an athlete to stick to the way they move, the way they did the previous 2 phases, or they take what they do in their warm up in that day and apply it to their percentage work, you're going to see athletes who grow by leaps and bounds, not, inches.
Yeah, absolutely. So our high CNS lift for the phase is going to be the snatch on those days of the week, which as usual will rotate kind of by a day each week. So, coaches aren't always coaching the exact same thing to the same people. Athletes, have the opportunity to, if they miss a snatch day one week, they get it another week. But it is intended to be kind of our lift only day. we spent a lot of years doing kind of lift and metcon, and there's a place for that, and there's still plenty of that in the program. But when we're really trying to focus on getting athletes better at a lift, trying to get them stronger, the best way to do that in a 1 hour class for all of us affiliates is to try to make that the only focus. That being said, we totally understand that there are some gyms out there, maybe your population, we have I would say a younger than average population at our HQ gym, where snatching is one of those things where it's like, yeah, this is going to be a challenging session for some people. If you have maybe a gym that's got an older demographic where things like, hey, like overhead squatting, the mobility limitations are kind of can become challenging. We have the kind of optional bodybuilding or conditioning that'll go on that day too. So you've got athletes who are like, great, I like lifting, but I also, I want to breathe hard. I want to get my heart rate up. We're going to have those maybe get a pump. We are going to have those options for you on those days.
And we really do. You and I both subscribe to the belief that like everybody should learn how to snatch. Now, everyone can perform a beautiful squat snatch, but everyone should learn how to snatch. So if you're one of those gyms, our second location in Wyndham, which is about 15 minutes from HQ, is like that older population you just referenced. And they're going to see a day of, 9 sets of snatches and go, oh shit, 9 sets to do something I'm very terrible at.
Yep.
But what you coaches can do out there is say, all right, let's fix one thing in this lift today. Maybe you aren't doing a squat snatch. Maybe you're figuring out all these positions, power snatching, then resetting your feet, taking a big belly breath in, bracing, and then trying your best to perform a full overhead squat. That is still an immensely valuable tool that I think some places, some locations, some gyms, some coaches are like, if I can't teach you the, pinnacle of what the movement should look like, that I should just skip it and I should just avoid it completely because I'm going to get someone hurt.
No.
And in this situation, all you need to do is think differently, is say, I need to reduce the loading and I need to provide them with the opportunity to express this movement to the best of their ability, and know that like the percentages exist to help your highest level athletes, but there's nothing wrong with taking them back even a little bit further if you have someone brand new or someone who has mobility requirements that don't allow them to get down and do an overhead squat very easy. Basically, the PSA is there, don't skip this movement. Find a way to help an athlete succeed in spite of their limitations or where they are in their fitness journey.
I would argue that if you are that coach or owner, you have that sort of gym, like this is the day to convince those athletes that like, this is where you could probably have the most bang for your buck. Cause like, what are we trying to accomplish with the snatch for the average person? Well, we're teaching somebody to take something from the ground and put it overhead. Okay, check. We're trying to teach people the importance of hip extension and the hip drive, which is one of the, I don't remember you might know this better than I do, but like basically like proper hip function is one of like the cornerstones of somebody who's going to be healthy for an extremely long period of time, kind of stay out of the nursing home. Okay, so we've got hip extension. We're holding something overhead. Okay, holding something overhead, that's an easy one. The midline demand and the flexibility requirement. And, for the older population, maybe there is a med ball underneath your butt, but working through as much of that range of motion as possible. Like find me some human who's got a mobility deficiency and then ask them to overhead squat with, maybe it's just a PVC pipe, and try to improve that and see what that does for their health. So all of these kind of metrics that have nothing to do with how much you can snatch can be hugely beneficial to that population.
And you didn't even touch on some other things. There's balance, there's coordination, there's accuracy, all those things. You're talking about the older population. The number one thing that is correlated to how long you're going to live is how much muscle mass you have relative to fat mass. So like if you make someone lift a barbell, they're going to develop more muscle tissue. They're going to learn about where their body is in space. They're less likely to fall and break their hip and then have to go to the hospital, and then 6 months later are in the nursing home or passing away. So like I think you hit that argument perfectly. The less likely you want to do it, the more you need it, and the bigger carryover it's going to have for your overall fitness.
But we're still going to get people strong.
Oh, shit, yeah. We don't going to skip the
we're not going to skip that. So our skill focus for the phase is going to be the back squat. Thank goodness it's coming back. And that means that next phase, what we try to do is kind of, okay, we're going to focus on the skill of something. So like we worked on the snatching last phase of the skill work. It's now kind of a big, it's the high CNS lift for this phase. For phase 3, the phase 3 skill is going to be the back squat, which means phase 4, you're going to get real strong. But
sore legs.
This is something you wanted to do, especially, is like, man, people like, it's a squat, like it's not that hard, right? It's like, well, why do people still do it badly.
A big part of what I want to accomplish with the skill things, I mean, you and I talked about before we kind of etched out our template for it, is that, you know, you see so many athletes love the back squat phase and they work their ass off the entire phase and they get done. And again, similar to what we talked about deadlifts earlier in the podcast, is like, hey man, I didn't PR today. And sometimes, you know, we've talked about this in the past, you know, you had a rough day or, you know, it just wasn't that your day for you. But for a lot of people, it's because they aren't consistent with their mechanics. And one day they get in a great bounce because they've warmed up a great amount. And other days they feel stiff and tight and they change the way they move. And all of a sudden it's like, it feels like every time I do a squatting session, I'm doing a different movement. Yep. And the idea behind a skill phase is to cement the fundamentals so that when you go to have the high CNS, every single session that you do correctly is more beneficial than every single session you do sort of good.
Right.
And it's like almost like a multiplier. The better you move, the more you advance, the stronger you get, which means when it comes back around again, you continue to get better than your peers. So to get everyone sort of what we call like a level playing field, we want everyone's fundamentals to be picture perfect for their body type and their experience as we can get them, so that when they do the high CNS phase with back squat in phase 4, they're not wondering why does it feel different every single time. They've made these fundamental changes and now they're allowed to express them with a high CNS lift. And at the end of 7 weeks, you know, they're not happy that they, you know, a 5-pound PR, they're talking 20, 30 pounds with some of your people. So to me, it's really important that our methodology takes someone from let's etch in the fundamentals, make sure they're consistent. And then once those fundamentals are consistent, then we can worry about, all right, let's go heavy and make sure that all that consistency can be tested with some, you know, heavy squat sessions.
And that's what's cool about kind of the way that we structure this is like that happens. So yes, the phase is only 7 weeks long, but when you try to connect the dots from phase to phase, it becomes a much longer, you know, a much bigger picture where we're still kind of resetting athletes every 7 weeks to make sure we don't lose folks, and that, you know, the kind of, what am I trying to think of? Like the attention span, everybody's attention span. We don't lose folks, but we still want to, hey, we're going to develop a skill. Let's not brain dump that at the end of the phase. Let's actually apply it, which is what we're going to do with the squatting.
Kind of like a color, almost like color by numbers. Like you're coloring like one specific color on this picture and then another one. And at first it feels like none of these things are connected. You're just doing this thing for a little while, then that thing for a little while. And at the end, you're like, oh, like I actually have this picture now. Picture. Yeah, here's the picture. Yeah, so
that's a good way to
put it. That's a way to kind of draw the connection with an athlete that are like still not quite understanding. Like, why did we all that tempo stuff if we're going to go really heavy now? I went like you were saying, I went 95 pounds for 7 straight weeks. How's that going to translate to me doing 245 during test week? And it's like, trust us. If you focus on how you move and you move the same way you did with your tempo that you do with your heavy, we're going to fix your first pull. You're going to snatch more weight and then you'll see the connection there. But again, it does take that buy-in, and it's on us coaches to help athletes get that buy-in. That's our job. In addition to making the move safe, is try to create that buy-in with our athletes.
Good segue. Our auxiliary. So one of the days each week, we also have kind of what we call either auxiliary or GPP. It's basically, hey, how can we either complement, either hit something that we're missing or complement the high CNS, with the snatch being one of those lifts that's just, it's so technically demanding. It's one of the few times in the year where we kind of have a second day per week of some form of snatching. And very similar to last year, we've got a combination of snatch pulls, snatch deadlifts, so maybe a little bit more towards the weightlifting specific realm, as well as some either complexes, continuing the tempo pulling to try to remind athletes like, hey, you know, you're not supposed to rip the bar off the floor at 100 miles an hour. There's a reason these positions exist. But we've got that built in 1 day per week as well. And then before we get to kind of our gymnastics focus, we've also got we've got kind of our in WOD feature. So something we like to mix in is making sure that we get that heavy, you know, we're not exclusively lifting heavy barbells outside the confines of conditioning, because things like the open, which isn't that far away, kind of, make sure that happens, but also like from a variance and just general physical preparedness standpoint, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense to only lift when you're not breathing hard and only do conditioning with these light weights. And
yeah, I mean, one of the core tenets of like, you know, CrossFit back in the day is that like it's great to have strength, but do you have functional strength? Can you call upon the strength that you've developed when you need to?
Yeah.
What better way to test someone's real life application of their strength than to stress them out with something that could be, a terrible commute to work and you have to go help someone do something. Like these are things that can be drawn parallels between your actual life and the gym. And the idea here is, it's great that you've developed this awesome 1 rep max lift, but you're probably never going to get to test it if you're not tired or fatigued or something ahead of it made it so you aren't in the perfect scenario that you are in right now. So yes, you need to work on the skill. You need to develop that skill with lots of heavy sessions, but then can you call upon it when it actually matters? So to me, the way I like to express strength to our members is, hey, it's all well and good to have it when everything's perfect, but can you call upon it when it matters? And a great way to test that is an in-WOD lift. Something right in the smack dab in the middle or at the very end of a nice, long, grueling, conditioning test.
Yep. And you will, athletes will get to experience that in the interval test this phase, which will be a spicy meatball. Okay. And then finally, gymnastics. Let's not forget about how important it is for athletes to be able to control their body weight, arguably before they start to control those external loads. So we've got a toes to bar focus, specifically kind of a volume accumulation. Toes to bar, one of those skills. It's as with any, I was talking to one of our athletes about the gymnastics sort of stuff. And it's like, it's tough because as a coach, I want to say, yeah, work on this every, once a week or twice a week for 6 weeks and you'll be better at it. But with gymnastics, there's so much that go into that. Things like, what's your body composition, which is always a good segue to talk to an athlete. It's like, I want to get kipping pull-ups. It's like, well, is your body weight to strength ratio like where it needs to be to do those successfully. But with the toes to bar, we've got a pretty good progression of just kind of accumulating volume to get people comfortable hanging. And obviously there's a lot of functionality in like the kipping mechanism and the shoulder and hip, kind of the coordination aspect of that stuff. But toes to bar for volume accumulation, and then just some good old fashioned, like kind of midline strength work, like weighted sit-ups. Like as much as I personally hate ab mat sit-ups, like in a workout, I think there's a lot of value in developing people's, kind of anterior, midline, and one of our strength perspective.
One of our focuses is getting, athletes and gyms ready to participate in the open. That's one of the core tenets of Misfit Athletics. We're trying to get better at the sport of it, and Team Misfit was born off that. And, one of the things that we often see happen in the open each year is a cog in the wheel where they get thrown a set of 25 toes to bar, and they've only done Metcons with 5s and 7s and 9s in it. And they're like, how do I start to build up the capacity so that this doesn't fry me? I'm able to do, I can think back to the one that had like, I think it was 50 double unders, 25 toes to bar, and then like a squat clean ladder that ascended in weight. And yes, don't get me wrong, a lot of people did get cemented by one of the barbells. Eventually they weren't strong enough to keep playing along. But for a lot of athletes, the toe to bar volume going from 25 to 50 total to 75 in 3 rounds that weren't very long quickly added up and essentially presented the brakes on the workout. It stopped athletes in their tracks. So one of the things that's really important to us is developing tools for increasing capacity. And one of the things that we try to make sure we had here is a decent amount of variance in that, so athletes can kind of see, all right, like I did this 2 weeks ago and it was 5s and 3s, and this week it's 7s and 4s. Like, all right, can I feel as good and get as many rounds as I did in the 5 and 3s now as I'm in the 7 and 4s? And that is just, again, proof of concept that, by putting my reps in, I'm going to be able to further push the needle on my capacity so that when these tests come up and there's this big chunk of a movement, one, I know how to attack it. I know what my body's capable of currently doing. I know how it feels to do that many reps. And then I quickly learn that like a lot of the boundaries I put on myself are self-inflicted, and I've found a way to break through them with linear progression. I used to think that 5 was my repeatable set, and by the end of the phase, it turned into a 9. That's very quickly becomes, a 50% increase in volume across a workout. And we're talking 4 reps, but like those things add up very, very quickly. So it's important to us that we build a robust capacity in toes to bar because 1, it's an excellent exercise, but 2, we often see gymnastics movements be the cog in the wheel for athletes. So how do we help them? We start with small sets and progress to bigger and bigger and try to find different ways to build confidence in different avenues with that movement.
I was trying to remember what the toes to bar test was, and I remember you wrote it, and that's a spicy meatball.
Coach Kyle tests that. He's had a good number out there for you to get, and I won't leak the whole thing, but he was north of 100. So north of 100 in a gymnastics test. So have fun. But
fear not, athletes will get their fitness in before they get there. So, and then finally, we'll just talk briefly about the competitor extra. So if you're new or thinking about jumping on board, we both of us are firm believers like, hey, the 1 hour class is the bread and butter, and that's what 99.9% of people need. Yep. But obviously we're Misfit Athletics. We like to compete. We need the sport of CrossFit. We both believe that the sport of CrossFit helps affiliates. So what happens? What do we do if we have athletes who want a little bit extra, who maybe have their eyes on, the open or quarterfinals as their competitive outlet for the year? We have the competitor extra that's designed for that. And that's also has its own little kind of mini, phase structure that also like goes throughout the year. It's not like we only care about that stuff, the one phase before the open. It kind of rotates over the course of the year to make sure athletes are feeling good. And I think just like we'll say that there's a lifting day, kind of an additional lifting day. This phase, we're going to focus on the split jerk, kind of getting closer to the open, but it's also just like a nod to the fact that one, we do know that there's those athletes out there who want a little bit more. And maybe you do have the athlete who's like, yeah, the 1 hour a day is good, but I would like to see some improvement. You don't need to be a competitor to have that desire to, get better at something, right? And that's what the competitor extra's for.
And one thing I really like that you just said, and I don't think you've ever said it on any of our podcasts before, but there is a structure to the extra work. And if you're someone that gets the programming in advance, you're going to notice very quickly that it's not just all extra lifting, and it's not all just like big sets of muscle ups. It's what an athlete actually needs to be competitive in our space. You're going to see lots and lots of conditioning. You're going to see lots and lots of the stimuli that we think you'll see an athlete go through at the quarterfinal and semifinal level. So, this is not to like scare anyone away from doing it, but to remind athletes that like, everyone wants to download a squat template. Everyone wants to figure out the best way to get to 25 unbroken muscle ups. But at the end of the day, our sport is conditioning, and you need to be able to go to a very dark place, and you got to know what that dark place does to you, so that if you have to do it again through multiple rounds, how to adjust and adapt. So to me, if you're having a gym that likes to have that competitor extra, you're going to notice there are 5 things or 6 things per week. And, more often than not, it's just gross conditioning that's going to really move the needle on someone's overall fitness. And if you can create the buy-in to get them to realize they don't need a squat template or a muscle up template, but instead need to work really hard in some gross pieces, you're going to have those athletes who quickly take leaps and bounds ahead of others, because that is what our sport takes to be the best.
Absolutely.
Be the best sport.
Yeah. Yeah. So, we should also note that like kind of as we wrap up here, we get excited about all this stuff. We talked about like, toes to bar. It's kind of gymnastics-y, snatching. That's obviously a pretty high skill, complex lift. We're talking competitor extra, where the test is dumbbell squat snatch, burpees, and muscle ups in a really spicy burner. It's like, okay, well, great, my gym, or we just don't have people who are interested in competing. We're also really firm believers that hey, the program should work for everyone. And we've got some pretty fucking fit people at our gym. And I'll rarely, but we'll do it today, say like, hey, we're pretty fit as well, and this stuff is like
kicks my ass.
It kicks our ass. Yeah. But in addition, so we've got kind of the probably the fittest taken care of. If you got athletes who are higher level, then that's where it's like, hey, maybe it's an individual competitor program like our Misfit Athletics stuff, but it's appropriate for those high level folks. And then we always provide those scaling options, even for the competitor extra. So just because it says competitor doesn't mean it's, hey, that's for the person who maybe has that kind of that psyche of like, oh, I want that extra work. But we still provide the scaling and how to make it appropriate for everyone.
Yeah, it's important to me that no matter what is given to a gym or whatever a coach delivers, that you need to be ready with as many different options and ways to modify that, because not every gym has sign up ahead of time. You don't know what's going to walk through your door. Someone could get in a car accident on the way to the gym and say, no, screw it, I'm still working out today. And you have to be ready to either have a conversation of like, no, you look concussed, you should probably go see a doctor, or like, all right, like I can see your hands banged up a little bit. Let's be smart and not use your hand today. So like, you need to be prepared for those things. And a mark of a very good coach, and something we actually didn't talk about in the snatch, but I want to say now, is that like, this program isn't just to challenge your athletes. It's to challenge you as a coach. We want coaches continually finding different ways to deliver a very similar message, because you never know what's going to cause a breakthrough for an athlete. You might phrase something the same way 99 times out of 100, and then one day you change 1 or 2 words and all of a sudden 3 people have a aha moment. That's awesome. And coaches should be continuing to do that. So, I do challenge you coaches out there. If you're like, no, we don't do the competitor extra, maybe you try an open gym and you invite people over to come over and try the competitor extra and say, hey guys, we're going to go through a hang, snatch, muscle up, burpee workout. And everyone raises their hand. I don't have muscle ups. All right. Now the coach is up to bat and say, all right, how can you make this workout feel the way it's supposed to feel for the best athletes, for your everyday average Joes who are looking to just get fitter today.
Yeah, and I think that's a good kind of place to wrap it up. But that's the whole concept of the our affiliate programming. It's we do the legwork as far as making sure there's variance, not only over the course of a phase, but over the entire year, because we like the affiliates that follow the program for, I would say, the majority. I should probably know this number, but the number of affiliates we have that have been Team Misfit affiliates have been Team Misfit affiliates for literal years, like for the most part. And that obviously, like when somebody new signs up, that's a new gym that we have to work for and convince, like, hey, like this is going to work long term, give it the chance that it needs. But like there's a reason so many of our affiliates are just like going on year number 2, 3, 4, sometimes even longer of doing the program, because athletes see the results, but also their coaches have bought in, their coaches have developed into a professional coach, which is always the impetus for the program.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I mean, I'm excited to see what our gym's up to here. We spent, again, like you said, 2 phases dialing in the snatch. We're excited to see those PRs. Continue to shoot, Hunter and I DMs if you have any questions as coaches, or if you're an athlete at one of these gyms and you want to know a little more, about it. Hit up Team Misfit Gyms on Instagram. We'll be happy to jump in those DMs and get back to you. But it's really important to us that you have a good program, you understand why you're doing what you're doing, and that you have the accessibility of both of him and I to get a hold of us if you need any help. Because again, we always go back to the rising tide raises all ships. Like, we want to make sure that we're continuing to pushing the boundaries of what it means to be a professional coach and a Team Misfit coach. So if we can help you at all, please, don't be afraid to reach out to me. I'm at MF Sherb and you're at Hunter Should. Reach out to us. We're happy to, help you with your gym's journey, and we're thrilled that you're, watching this, and we'll see you on the next one.